Well, hello there. This is Shane from Shane's Reviews. How are you doing today? Well, I do hope well. No? Well, I'm sorry. I hope it gets better. But what we're going to be talking about today is Dune. Dune! Yay, Dune. No, really, seriously, yay, Dune. God Emperor of Dune, wrote by Frank Herbert, narrated by, I'm so horrible, Simon Vance. There we go. Quick word about the narrations and the production. It's good, it's clean, it's crisp. Simon Vance does a pretty good job with it, so kudos. Good job there. Now, this is, where do we start? Because Dune is really complicated. Oh, I know where we're going to start. We're going to start with this comment right here. The one that specifically says, people that have a low IQ and don't understand this need to go back to school. If you would, Scraps, please splash that on the screen. Why did you leave a comment like that? That's not nice. We want a nice and friendly community around here. And, you know, I left it up because it wasn't mean, but on the same token, nobody has said anything that was ignorant, dumb, stupid, lacking of intelligence, ideology, nothing about that Dune video. So we need to have a conversation why you thought that was appropriate. Perhaps you looked at the thumbnail and the title and you just made a comment, but you didn't actually watch the video, which is what I suspect. So let's be real, be nice, or you'll never make a comment again. All right, so moving on from that, housekeeping is done. So this book right here is continuing on, and if you'll think back to the other videos that I've made about this, I was like, I wonder where this is going to go, because I've kind of gotten to that point now where the books are going to be new to me. I've gotten through the ones that I've already read, and now I'm getting into the territory where it's new for me. And I don't know why I never finished out the series in the past, but I was speculating and I was curious about what was going to happen with the characters, because it looked like things were being set up where Paul was going to be retired as a character and that Leto was probably going to be taking over. There was the Golden Path that had been mentioned a few times in the previous books, and on top of it, the way that all the different political entities, such as, well, everybody that had their own ambitions about the spice, how were they going to cope with the new system that was going to be put into place? Because it was very much hinted and alluded to and narrated that Leto was going to change things, completely removing spice from the universe. So, you know, the spacing guilds would no longer be able to fold space and safely navigate through. The Bene Gesserits, you know, where they had been trying to get the soothsayers and, you know, being able to see with complete presence the future. You know, how are they going to do that without spice? There's just all these different factions that were going to be affected by this, and it was a big curiosity for me, because I was like, well, you know, sounds to me like somebody's going to rewrite stuff, and oh my goodness, does it happen? It really does, because we jump ahead, not just a few years, but roughly 3,000 years, I think it was, which is a big leap. And now we've gotten to the point where Leto had covered himself whenever his sister and him was in the cave, and she escaped, and then he fought this thing off, got covered by these little sandworms across his skin, and then becomes something else, meets up with his father, and has the conversation that I just was referencing a while ago. Well, now he's got to the point where he's not very human, but you can tell he was human at some point. So he's kind of like imagine an 8-foot grub worm with flipper feet and arms sticking out of it. It's an amusing way to look at it, but it's not really well described in the book either, although there is plenty of description to give you your own ideas. I don't want to downplay it. That thing that I mentioned where it's just enough for your imagination to fill in the blanks, we're there. That's what that is. And it was good writing. You know, it's one of those things of, he's been at the head of the universe for so long now that he's accomplished his goals in this book. And he kept to it. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. There's a hoard of cash. The only worms on Dune or Arrakis are on his body, or is his body. That portion of the story towards the end was really, I'm not going to use the words out there, but I am going to use the far out, simply because it really was. But that's the thing. Even though it was really out there, the storytelling leading up to that was so good that it didn't matter. It fit into the story, and the characters were true to themselves and what they would be doing. Let's talk about some Duncan, Idaho. Yeah, shall we? Now, Duncan, of course, is a ghoul. Or Gola, excuse me. And if you don't know what that is, that's like a mechanical kind of mechanical It is a engineered being that was took from a single cell of DNA and reconstructed from that one piece of DNA. So they can make an entire clone of a person, brain pathways, everything, but there's usually a trick about it, right? The creators of these usually use them for politics and trapping people. Well, 3,000 years ago in the books they did, the selection, right? Duncan's been one of those long-term experiments for sure. Only the universe would know how many Duncan Idahos there's been in the Atreides family since this has happened. There's a very interesting side story with Duncan leading up to the end of the book. I really liked that story about, the previous Duncan had passed. Now there's this Duncan. He meets the kids from the previous Duncan, and it's a very interesting, here's a problem, and here's a box, but the problem's not in the box, and the person observing the problem is certainly not in the box either. It was kind of a unique head trip to experience, trying to have the empathy for that individual. What would they be going through? I mean, it's very clear that, repulsion would be one of them. So from a emotional standpoint, this book has a lot of payoff, really. The story, though, I have to say, it does drag a little bit at portions. To be completely fair, not every book that is epic or in an epic saga of whatever is going to be exciting from point A to point B. However, with that being said, there's so much that happens in this book that I think that is a very important one. Now, remember the last one, I was like, well, that's because the story was getting old. Because it was the same story being retold, just the lives were extending, right? So I'm really glad that the cutover to Leto had happened. Because if this was another story with Paul and this was just a continuation, I wouldn't have been able to sign up for it. And I'm glad that Frank Herbert realized that and did what he did in the previous book. So, we'll just say that there's a lot of things that are different in this one. And some of the stuff that has changed is really remarkable. I mean, there's still those factions, but they're not near as strong or as powerful as they once were. There's problems for the Spacing Guild because, like I said, they can't fold. They just can't do it. So they've been trying to create something that would allow them to do it. But, machines are against the rules because there was the uprising that happened. The Bene Gesserits, they, without spice, they just don't function very well. The water has returned to Arrakis, but there's only one place left where there isn't any. And he's going to hit the big reset button so that everything can get back on track to the way that it should be. In his mind, anyway. Because that's the problem with it, isn't it? If you set yourself up as a godhead, everybody's going to fear you, especially if you're powerful or if you have abilities that people around you don't, like living 3,000 years. I mean, what the hell? That's a long time. And no, I don't think I would want that. That's just a bit much. But on the same token, think about the people that, like if you were working for them, how difficult of a situation would that be, especially if they could just, he is a big worm, he could just roll on you and squish you. That's one, but, think about all the other things that go along with that, because in the first parts of him getting to this point, he wouldn't have been that big grubworm. I'm sorry, it just tickles me thinking about it that way. But, he would have had that physical prowess, and on top of it, the ability to speak with every ancestor that he's ever had that's in his direct line. It's quite amazing that omnipresence type knowledge and wisdom that a person would have from that. So that's a supernatural power. Secondary supernatural power, you probably can't kill the dude because he would see it coming, because, did I forget to mention, the dude can see pretty much everything in the future with the exception of his own death. I mean, that sounds familiar because it is familiar. But it's the best of all worlds because he's kind of got to that point where he's done. And so the story is going to continue. I'm excited to see what happens. I can tell from the setup that the reset button will be pushed and hopefully the Fremen will become what they were instead of what they have become. Have you ever read this book, and what do you think of it in comparison to the previous book? Did you enjoy that one more or this one more? I would love to know. Please tell me down there in the comment section below. Beyond that, and the original comment that we splashed up on the screen, these are the most interesting things that have come through this week. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the comments. It is much, much appreciated. And one day maybe I'll do a little comment show so that we can go over the comments and I can expound. So maybe I'll make a video about that. What do you think? Should I do that? And just give you guys one place to put a bunch of questions? Would that work? Q&A time? Yay! But beyond that, thank you so much for being here. If you have stayed this long, you're incredible. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And that thing should be coming over. So, like, share, subscribe. Please subscribe, please. If you haven't done it, please do it. Because it will only help us grow, and then we can get to be doing some other things that are really cool that are coming down the road. Beyond that, I don't know which one of these two videos over here you're going to pick, but if you pick one of those, I will see you in the next video. Now remember, it's crazy out there. Stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, try not to be people with a social distancing stick. You know what to do. Peace.